Reuters. Thanks so much for being here, Barry.
Yes, my pleasure.
As people flee their homes to fires in California, floods in Louisiana, insurers are bracing for big payouts and grappling with how their industry is changing with global warming and extreme weather. Andrew Logan is the director at Ceres. It's a network of investors and companies, public interest groups focused on sustainability. They've been paying a lot of attention to how the insurance industry is responding to changing threats and risks. Andrew Logan, welcome to On Point. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me on.
So, are insurance companies riveted by all this action? Are they changing their actuarial tables, if that's the right word, about what to expect? How do they survive if they have mountains of claims coming in from 500 and 1,000-year storms back to back?
Well, it's really a mixed picture. I mean, as you said, insurers are really on the front lines of climate change. And I think, insurers who have really thought about this issue, who have thought about what a world of climate change unleashed really means, I mean, they do see this issue as a threat to the industry's long-term survival. But surprisingly, or at least surprisingly to me, those insurers are actually the exception at this point, and they tend to be mostly in Europe and elsewhere in the world. And I think among U.S. insurers, there is still a real sense of denial that is keeping them from doing what we think they ought to be doing.
Well, those who are really looking at it, what are they doing?
Well, I mean, managing risk and helping society adapt to new challenges is what insurers have done for the last 100 years. And I think with an issue like climate change, insurers are in a great position to be part of the solution. They can help society plan for more extreme weather. They have the models, they have the expertise. And I think if you look at companies like Allianz or Munich Re in Europe, they're putting huge resources into modeling, into making sure that they can really understand, how extreme weather is going to evolve going forward. Where are we going to see more wildfires? Where are we going to see more floods? Because right now those models are woefully out of date, and that's incredibly important. I think equally as important is that they are taking their message to Congress and policymakers. If you're a Republican, maybe you don't want to listen to what Al Gore has to say on this issue, but I think you ought to listen to what a big conservative insurance firm is saying.
We understand how politicians might want to duck this because long-term issues are harder to take on. People feel near-term things more acutely. But insurance companies have responsibilities to their shareholders and their own long-term health. What would keep them from acutely following these trends? I mean, if they're not responding to them, maybe they don't believe it's happening.
Well, what they do is, I think they're taking a very short-term view, and I think in the short term, what they're doing is simply being reactive and pulling out of areas, pulling out of the Gulf Coast, raising rates, pulling out elsewhere along the coast, pulling out of high-risk wildfire areas. But that's a short-term solution and not a long-term solution. Eventually, they're going to be pulling out of essentially every market that they have available to them. So I think in the long run, it's in their interest to take a more proactive view, work with their policyholders to help them, strengthen their homes and prepare for, the new normal of more extreme weather that we know is here and coming down the road.
Maybe they've got a model that doesn't migrate well to a climate change era. I mean, maybe they just can't. I mean, how much can people pay for insurance? Maybe it's just not a viable business if we get too much fire and too much flood and the rest.
Well, that is the very real, concern that the European insurers have, is that, the whole model of insurance is basically moderate, predictable risk. And as we head into a climate change era, risk is becoming a lot less predictable and a lot less moderate. So yeah, the real question on the table is, is the world insurable, in a climate change future?
What happens if it's not? I mean, right now we've got government backstopping in a lot of places in California. I think the government there is a fire insurer of last resort. What happens when insurers pull out of particularly vulnerable areas?
I mean, the economy really slows down and even shuts down. I mean, I think people don't always appreciate just how much insurance makes the world go around. I mean, you can't buy a house, you can't buy a car, you can't start a business without affordable insurance. And so I think what we've seen already in places like Florida and other areas of the coast where insurance is becoming harder to get is that the economy slows down. And I think that's just a taste of what we might see in the future. So I think there's a lot at stake here, not just for insurers, but for everyone who has a stake in the ecologist as a whole.
A lot of ramifications. One more caller from New Orleans, Jerry. Jerry, thank you very much for calling. You're on the air.
Hi, Tom. I'm an ecologist, and I fought fires in California as a young man, and I went through Katrina as an older man.
Okay.
I can tell you that there's extreme fire danger on the north shore of Lake Pontchartrain, where the current flooding is. That is almost completely unrecognized. And I'd also like to point out that Sacramento is at higher risk of a catastrophic flood than New Orleans is right now.
So who's gonna act on this, Jerry? Government, insurance companies? Who's gonna like start to really move?
The insurance companies will move first. They will